Alrighty then, this time we are going to go over the indicator inputs. Yeehaw! I'm going to be using MetaTrader 5 and NinjaTrader 8 side by side, and there is a good reason for it. That reason happens to be that MetaTrader 5 and MetaTrader 4 have exactly the same inputs, and Ninja 8 is a slight bit different. It's not hugely different. For the most part, the differences aren't enough to make any difference in your operation. There's just some very, very minor stuff that I'm obviously going to make you aware of. All right, so the first things, of course, I had previously discussed this very, very briefly, I believe in the first video of the tutorial. Basically, the buttons, I'll slide this up a little bit, the buttons, and over here for Ninja 8, they can have their default settings changed in the input settings. Now, where those differ, I'll just move this over here so we can kind of get these side by side. This first section, Cryptographer button defaults, a little bit of a hint there. First off, the always draw is not a button default, but it is one of the default settings that will affect how the indicator operates. Basically what this is, when you change to a chart, or first put it on a chart for that matter, it will start up in the active mode instead of in the off mode. So like with the buttons down here already on and ready to be activated, right now in the false, it would not automatically start up that way. I had to actually go down and click this to switch it. If this was set to true, or over in Ninja 8, this little checkbox was checked, what this would do is as soon as you apply the indicator to a chart, the button setup will become active and the hotkeys will be automatically active and ready for you to immediately start drawing. This can become important if you don't use any other indicators that use the control or the shift hotkey, and you cycle through a whole bunch of different charts and you want to do it quickly and draw your stuff on the chart. You will probably want to have this set to true, as it will allow you to just switch to a chart and then start drawing your stuff that you see, switch to another, start drawing immediately, and you won't have to go down and click the activation, deactivation button to turn it on or off or whatever. As I was pointing out earlier, these are all default buttons. Now, one thing you will notice, which I'm not entirely sure why I did this, but either I wasn't paying enough attention when I put the parameters in order, or I was paying so much attention that I forgot the reason why I did it. But for whatever reason, the manual automatic color change is down under the cryptographer parameters. This is one of those iffy choices that I could have had a reason for putting it down here with this. I would think that normally I would have put it up here, but it's supposed to be under the button defaults. This will be moved under the button defaults eventually, but I'll have to have time to actually get around to it. But since this is not actually affecting the operation of it, I'm just basically going to tell you straight out, this is supposed to be up under the button defaults and will eventually be up there, but it won't affect the operation any whatsoever. Okay, so the rest of these, basically what this is, however these are set, all of these buttons here, either they're clicked in the on position or in the off position, that is exactly the way it's going to load up when you put it on a chart. And both of these are exactly how they are listed here. You'll notice the clear and the delete do not have anything because they don't have any other optional settings than this. Neither does the ADV or the standby, and neither does the color button. There is a reason for this. And it's simply because there is no other option for these to be anything other than what they are automatically. The standby, obviously not even being a button, it's just an indicator light. So those are not in this list, but everything else, you'll notice point tracking mode set to lock to bar. It is lock, and same thing over here. Point tracking mode, lock to bar. It is set to lock. The locking type is set to magnetic on both of these. And if you look at the button, it's magnetic here, so on and so forth, right on down the list. And over in MetaTrader, all the way down the list, all the buttons match up with however they're set up in here, including the manual and automatic color. They're both set to automatic, which is most likely how you'll be operating the indicator most of the time anyway. I tried to just go with the defaults that during testing and using it on charts, I found to be generally the most likely to be used whenever I do anything. And so that's how I set up these defaults. Obviously, you can change it and you can save and load presets for your indicators. Same thing in NinjaTrader. You can set up a template for how you want to load everything up automatically so that you don't have to reset everything every single time you load it up. Additionally to this, there is another thing when you're trying to set up the button defaults. If you have everything set the way you want it and you load it up on a chart, we'll just go ahead and do that over here. You load it up on a chart and you draw something on a chart. Let's just see what we've got here. Looks like a bat pattern. Yep, okay. So we have a bat pattern right here. All the defaults stayed the same. If, however, I decide to change something, and let's just redo this. And now that we're selected on the bat, I can go and I can change any of these settings. Let's say I wanted my A-stack Fibonacci's on, and I don't want my prices or risk reward, but I do want those zones. And yeah, we'll just call that good. And let's say we want this to be the way we're having everything. Let's go ahead and throw on the price lines. What the heck? So if I advance, it saves this pattern as is, and it keeps those new settings for the button, for the buttons. If I draw another pattern, it will maintain all of these button settings. And if I change anything and then I advance to another pattern location, it will save all of those settings I have and then continue on with those settings locked in place. If you change something, let's say I turn these on and turn this off, and the name and the labels off, and the Fibonacci's off, and then I draw something, let's even go to free track mode, and I draw something down here, let's say, yeah, we'll throw on a risk reward pattern without zones, because we can. So I lock that in. Now, this risk reward pattern will have all of these settings stored, and it will maintain that even when it goes to another location. So it's at position 3 now, ready for the third. It will maintain those settings every time you advance unless you change something. Now I can go back, say, to this first pattern, and we'll just reinitiate this B point, and you'll notice all of these button settings reverted to what was chosen here. Now if I advance from here, it maintains all of those button settings. So whatever was the last pattern that you looked at, or had selected, I should say, it will maintain those settings when you advance to the next empty drawing location. This I found to be most convenient when I was doing any of the testing, because if I happened to be editing some specific pattern, I tended to want to use the same settings on my next drawing. So I just found it most convenient in that way. if I make any changes, I, in practice, tended to maintain those as I continued doing new drawings. This may not be the case for some of you, but given how patterns tend to be drawn on charts, this is likely to be the case. Whatever settings you have selected, you will probably end up tending to use those settings on every single drawing that you do. And it'll be just every once in a while you'll want to change something and then save it that way. And then as you go back, you'll undo the changes that you did to the button settings and go back to the way you were previously drawing stuff. That tends to be the way I operated, and I'm guessing that that's probably the way most people will end up operating as they're drawing stuff, just because it's a very fluid method of operation. So now we're going to look back in indicator settings. We're going to jump down to the next set of parameters. All right, so we're now in the cryptographer parameters, barring this first manual automatic color change. The magnet range. This specifically refers to when you're in the lock mode and have the magnet type selected up in the button defaults. This is what I'm referring to. You either have the standard or the magnetic type. We discussed what that actually is in the previous video. So with the magnet range, as I was discussing what this is, if I turn this on, as I sweep back and forth across the bar, it stays locked on that bar until I get a long ways away from it. Now what's going on, I have the settings the same in both of these. The magnet range is 9. So what's going on here is it's based on the center bar, and if you happen to notice on the options, it's either 3, 5, 7, 9, 11, or 13, all odd numbers. The reason for this is when you're trying to find a center point, you cannot be using an even number, because I can't lock onto bar 0.5 or 1.5 or 5.5, anything like that. There's no half bars, so it has to be an even number as we're going through all of these calculations. And thus, when it's looking at 9 bars, it's looking at a range that is, and I want to go in free mode with this. It's looking at a range of 9 bars. So it's looking at from here to here, or I should say from here to here. If I'm looking at this range, say I have my cursor over here, it's going to be looking at 4 bars on this side and 4 bars on this side as I'm sitting here in the middle of the range. And it's going to, as it scans across all these, it's going to see the highest bar in this range is right here. Unless, of course, I'm on the other side, and then it's going to be looking at this range of 9, and it's going to see, oh, well, this is the highest bar of this range. See, if I were to go down here and switch this back to free mode, and I go here, so now I'll switch that off. It's looking at this range right across through here because I was hovering over this bar, which is the center of this range, and it sees that this is the peak of this range, and so therefore it locks onto this bar. And as I sweep over, if I get, I believe it's going to be right here, I'm just quickly glancing at this, it should jump over to this candle peak right here. So we're over this bar, we're over this bar, and there it jumps. And that is now locked onto this bar. And what it's doing here, now we're jumping down to here, because now I have gotten in range over this bar, and then I move one further forward, and it locks onto this bar because in this range from here to here, this is the highest peak, or in this case, lowest peak, since I'm on the bottom of the bars. So that's how the lock mode actually works when we're doing any of the drawing across this. So, and you can change this to be a lot smaller or a lot larger. I found if I go smaller, I don't get quite so much the benefit of locking onto the peak that I'm looking for very, very quickly and easily. But obviously, some people will prefer it. For instance, 3 bars would just be literally the bar in front of or behind. So if I was hovering right here, it would be looking at this bar, and this bar. So very, very tiny range. And obviously you're going to have almost the same problem locking onto a peak quickly as you would if you were in standard mode, which is only going to lock directly to the bar below. So I suggest playing around with this range. You may find that you like the standard locking better than magnet. Play around with it, see what suits your particular style of drawing and finding your peaks of the patterns as you're drawing them. And, there you go. Set that up. Okay, moving along. The risk reward zone width, that's literally the width of the zone when you have the prices displayed. This button here, the RRZ, it's the zone that it's talking about. The price line length, when you go in and draw, well, I'll just pop it on here real quick. I'll switch to free mode. Boom, boom, boom. Now, if I go and I switch on price lines instead of this, these are what it's talking about. It just simply uses dashes, and however many dashes you have set up in that particular setting, that is how it determines how long those price lines are going to be. So you can easily change how long those lines are projected. Very, very simple to do. This triangle area opacity. This is talking about the triangular projection for the D point, and it'll probably be easiest if I just redraw that real quick. So we'll put this pattern on here. This triangular zone right here, when this fades into existence, when you're at the absolute peak, that is when it will reach maximum translucency or opacity, and that can be adjusted directly in settings. So if we go down where we left off, this the triangle area opacity, this is 10%, and in MetaTrader it's set to 20% because the calculation is done a little bit differently and it results in a different level of viewability as you're looking at it. Anyway, I had to sort of fake an opacity for this. There is no actual opacity in the normal drawing. This measure XA, we'll jump here and I'll show you this real quick. So if I have the defibs turned on right here, up here on the NinjaTrader, and I draw a pattern, these yellow numbers right here, 23 pips and 8 bars, that is what this is referring to. Measure XA. Obviously, you don't have to have it display that. If I jump into settings and I find the measure XA, I turn that to false, click OK, and then continue on with what I was doing. You'll notice, even though the defib is turned on, that number is not displayed. So you can have the defib on, but not have it display the distance measurement for this XA line. With the static A and C Fibonacci projections, that's directly referring to these measurements. It goes from fib number 1, which is up here. This is 100%, 88.6%, 78.6%, so on and so forth, all the way down the chain till it gets to 0%. And then you'll notice negative 0.272. This is where it does the inversion and starts measuring the projected beyond the 0% in the reverse. Well, I guess technically this is a extension, since it continues on, the inversion would be up here. Anyway, they're the same type of measurement. So if you want the extension, you just put it as a negative number without the one obviously in front of it, because it's already at 100% at the 0. So you're just adding in the non-100% aspect of it. And you could, of course, put, if you wanted to put in like a 227.2% projection, you would put a 1 here, and it's going to add that extra 100% by default, and then 1.272, it'll add 127.2% onto this base level 100% as it continues on. So that's how you would get a beyond 100% projection for the extension. For the inversion, you would simply just put it in as you would think, instead of it being 0 point something, which is obviously any of these. It would be 1 point something. So you could do 127.2% inversion up here by simply putting changing one of these numbers to 1.272. Not negative, but just a straight positive number. And these can be changed. You don't have to have all of these levels as they are if you don't use extensions this way very much, but you prefer to use inversions, or if some of these are numbers that you ignore frequently. For instance, the 50%, it's, you know, if you don't deal with bat patterns very often, you might ditch the 50% and use it for an inversion or an extension. You can do that however you want, and it's the exact same way for the Fibonacci stack over on the C side. This one, however, does not have an extension down here. It has the inversion up top. And of course, that is because generally when people are using this, it's either one of the 3 patterns that would be within 100%, which is obviously the cipher, the Gartley, and the bat, or they're checking for a butterfly, which is going to need the inversions. So this is exactly the same as this as far as these parameters go. You can set this however you want, no problems. What the other thing is that can be affected with these, you have other options here, fib percent and the AFib price. Literally, that is referring to the percentage display and the price display. So if I turned both of these off, well, what would happen? Okay, well, let me just move this over here, and I'll flick off this and this and hit apply. You'll notice all it places is the little lines at all of the levels. You can have either just the lines, just the price, just the percent, or the price and the percent, however you want it. It's exactly the same for the A and the C, so no big deal there. Additionally, on each of these, as I pointed out previously, the static Fibonacci's on both the A and the C are default orange, and they don't change with the automatic color parameter set. You can flip that on with the ACLR button. You can adjust that also inside here. When you change the color, it does not affect the static Fibonacci stacks. You can change the color, the default color, from something other than orange, but whatever you change it to, it has to be done in the settings, and it will just stay that particular color on all the patterns. So this is If you want to change it from the orange, it can be done, but it's going to be this way on all the patterns. It's not going to be like you can draw a pattern that has an orange Fibonacci stack and then a different pattern will have a different color. That won't happen. Whatever this is, it's going to be exactly the same on all the patterns that you draw. All right, so what the deal is with the alerts, when you have a pattern drawn, and oh, what do you know? I messed up on this. Okay, so might as well point this out while I'm here. You notice there is a point that is lower than my C point. This is not a dumb drawing tool as you put the patterns on the chart like some other pattern drawing tools. It's not just a matter of you just draw the pattern on and it looks at itself and says, oh yeah, that's a valid pattern. This actually looks at the bars before and after all of your points and intelligently determines whether or not it is a valid pattern. If it's not a valid pattern, then it's not going to tell you it's a valid pattern. So if you do like what I just did and you're careless with putting your points on and not paying the slightest bit of attention, then you'll end up with a bad pattern. But that's easy to fix. You go back, fix this, and suddenly we have a valid bat pattern. Here's the deal, going with these alerts. Obviously, you can draw patterns that aren't already completed. And let's say I had a pattern that came down here in the B point. Let's say it came up to here and then down here. And we were expecting that a bat pattern is going to come in somewhere probably around here. And that's what we're looking at. If we have the sound on pattern activated, what this is going to do for the bat pattern, it's going to look at this parameter, and when the price is within 25 pips of wherever your D point projection is, it's going to start sounding an alert. And it's independent for each pattern. So this is available. Next up, we've got the drawing parameters of all the different patterns. These are little technical details for how they are displayed for valid patterns once they're completely drawn. So your target 1 is measured at the 38%, and then the target 2 is measured at the 618. The stop loss type projection can be changed. Right now this is set to a fixed pip of 10 pips. If you change that to the inverted graystone, it does 113% projection, which is going to be above the X point, which if I just turn on. All right, so yeah, let's just go ahead and change this so we can show this as an example. All right, so let's go and we'll use this. And we'll do 113%. Okay. All right, now you'll see 113%. So what this parameter does, if you set this to inverted graystone, then it looks down here at what this percentage is, 113%. So it's going to look for a Fibonacci inversion 113% here. And this stop loss parameter, if I were to go in and change it, it'll change from here to here. Wrong platform. Jump down to the bat pattern parameters, fixed pip, inverted graystone. Okay, and close. Now you'll see 113%, and the stop loss has moved up to 113%. With the Stokes ATR, it uses an ATR calculator and multiplier. At default, it uses a 7-period ATR and just uses a 1x multiplier. So whatever the ATR period is, it will add that on to the X point and be done with it. If you set this to, say, a 2x multiplier, then it'll look at the ATR period, and then it'll double that number and add that to your X. Very, very simple. It's exactly the same across all of the patterns. Nothing changes, so once you know this about one of them, you know this about all of them. And then finally, for the cryptographer inputs, this brings us to the end of that for all of these colors. We have the dynamic Fibonacci color, which is these little numbers here, the dynamic Fibonacci's for when you turn on, let me jump over here. Yeah, they're both off at the moment. The defib button on either of these platforms, that's what this is referring to. And just like I was saying with the Fibonacci stacks, having this changed to a different color, it will affect every single one of the Fibonacci stacks, not for just one pattern, but for every single drawing. So whatever this is set to, all of these are going to change on every pattern throughout your entire drawing. This, the locked tracking color, this is referring to, let me just do this over here. This is referring to when you have a drawing going on and it is locking to the bar. This line and the dot is what this color is referring to. The edit tracking color, let's draw something on real quick. All right, so these white lines here, that is what this is referring to. The edit tracking color, you can change any of those three colors, and it's just a static color. It's going to be the same every single time those pop up, so nothing's going to change with that. Then we have color 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and so on and so forth, all the way down through 19. So what's the deal with these colors? Well, this is when you have the color changing of the patterns. So as you notice, deep blue sky, that's what this color here is for this pattern. If we were to go to the next one, and I think I have them exactly the same. It looks like maybe I don't. I did not necessarily keep that the same between the platforms because of the color differences in the platforms, but I think I have everything at least remotely similar. Yeah, there are some differences. But anyway, as you can see, both of them start with deep blue sky, and then I had a change for these. This went to light green, this went to light salmon, then both are rosy brown, and then plum and bisque. So for the most part, they're the same order of the series, but not always. So what the deal is, anytime you have it in automatic color, it's going to start with the deep blue sky when you draw a pattern, and then it's going to shift forward 1. So it's going to go to the next color in the series, and the next pattern you draw is going to be that next color, and then it'll shift 1 more when you go to a third pattern, and again when you go to a fourth. If you happen to go and have a drawing, let's just pop another one down here. Let's go with a butterfly. Haven't done one of those in a while. Get rid of these static Fibonacci's, and we go to manual color. Now you can click the button and the pattern will change colors until you're happy with whatever color it is. Now if you do this and you go and you draw another pattern, it's going to be the same exact color. Obviously you can then change it again, but you could see how this would get really, really tedious, which is why I came up with the automatic color shifting. That way you draw a pattern and then you draw another pattern and it's a different color. And you draw another pattern and it's a different color. And you can see how when you get enough patterns, they start overlaying and it can get confusing. That's why the automatic color is a thing. It's to help you be able to identify patterns when they start overlaying each other. And that is it. You now know everything you need to know to leverage the full functionality of the cryptographer. Don't have too much fun with it.